Now, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Change of pace is a lot more important than speed in the game of basketball. It doesn't matter how fast you are, how slow you are. It's a skill that anyone can develop and utilize. Some of the big names that have mastered this skill are Luka, Kyrie, Paul George, and my personal favorite, the best that I've ever seen do it with my own two eyes, Derrick Rose. All of them have mastered change of pace to the highest level. They all kind of have their own cadence and style to how they go about it. But more importantly, they all have similarities that we'll cover in this video. Similarities we can all learn from and take to implement into our game at our own style so that we can learn how to change pace like an NBA pro. First things first, as usual, hit the like, sub up if you haven't. I'm Jiki Hills, and let's get to it. So a lot of you want to be super fast, super athletic, and blow by defenders at will. And I understand it. But what does that really look like without change of pace? Well, honestly, to me, it looks like Russell Westbrook. Westbrook is a generational athlete. He's extremely fast and he's extremely aggressive almost all the time. But that also makes him extremely predictable. And the number one rule in change of pace, in my personal opinion, is remaining unpredictable. You never want to telegraph where exactly you're going to go on the basketball court, and we'll cover different ways you can do that later on in this video. As for Westbrook, his body and his mind play at 100% speed all the time. That's why he makes some of the mistakes he does, some of the turnovers he does. He's just predictable. Now, when Westbrook was younger and he was full of energy and full of speed, young athleticism, he could get away with these things. But he's older now, and not only is he predictable, he's not as quick as he used to be. So change of pace has only become more valuable in his older age. Now, currently Westbrook is a free agent. Do I think he should be a free agent? Absolutely not. But it just shows how predictable his game has become. Now, as I said, the most important thing in change of pace is unpredictability. So to do this, you probably don't want to be super smooth. Now, Paul George is someone with one of the smoothest handles we've ever seen, and I know this. But there are other ways to create that unpredictability. Now, Paul George, I will also say, probably creates the least amount of space before he takes a shot in comparison to guys like Kyrie, Luka, Derrick Rose, James Harden, the creme de la creme of changing pace and separation. He's, I'd say, in the weaker end of things, but still great at it nonetheless. So when creating that unpredictability, I noticed with Paul George, he mainly does this with his feet. So in between those very smooth and silky handles, he has these sudden movements with his feet, these sudden steps, kicks, whatever it may be. It creates an element of unpredictability of whether he's going or he's not going. They're like little tiny micro steps, maybe jabs, whatever you want to call them, and you can see them on film. Creates a lot of confusion for the defender and allows him to create his separation. The more common way we see players create that unpredictability is by pretending to be predictable. They will actually rock their defender to sleep. You usually use a repetitive, slow-paced dribble and then exploding and attacking their defender. James Harden is probably the most effective at doing this in the league, but it's important to know that players all across the league and everywhere use this. Now, it's important to understand that change of pace can be initiated with your body or with your handle. It's about being creative, it's about being unorthodox, it's about being unpredictable. These essentially are the most important keys to initiating a change of pace. So when it comes to the actual movement, what exactly is change of pace? Well, it's your ability to accelerate and decelerate. Now, this can be from a standstill to a sprint or a sprint to a standstill. It can also be from a jog to a sprint or a sprint to a jog. So that's essentially change of pace. It's how many ways can I master that I'm trying to go somewhere or not go somewhere in order to get to where I need to go. Now, defenders are often reactionary. They're reacting to the movements that someone is making. Now, a great defender may be proactive and force you to go to certain places, but in general, average defenders are reactionary. So I'm going to use that time gap of reaction to my advantage. I'm going to slow down when you're speeding up, and I'm going to speed up when you're slowing down. Now, I can do this for many reasons. I could do this because I want to create separation, which is obviously the most common reason, but I can also use this to my advantage to get to the free throw line, to draw a foul. Now, an example of this is none other than the great SGA, the current MVP. He does this very well. Also, Luka is a great example of this as well. These so-called foul baiters and free throw merchants are very elite at changing pace. It may not look like they're changing pace, but that's very often what they're doing in order to draw a foul. It's all a game of chess. It's all a game of anticipation. So in general, where you want to change pace is where, for example, you have a defender riding your hip, pause, big pause. You may want to slow down, pull back, and create that separation. You may also want to change pace when you are in transition and you see an open lane. You don't want to sprint end to end straight to the basket, because then everyone can see what you're trying to do and where you're trying to go. You're trying to score the ball. You're probably going to want to creep up to maybe half court, just past half court. Once you're in striking distance, turn on the jets and get to the basket. You got to make sure that you're not very predictable and that you are not giving away where you're trying to go. Honestly, there's only a few times where you're ever really going to sprint end to end. And that's probably going to be one, you're extremely fast, like a Derrick Rose or Russell Westbrook. Two, where you're trying to bait the defender to thinking that you want to score and probably kicking out to the three to get a wide open look. And I guess the third one would be there's no time on the clock. Now in a half court setting, floating the ball is a great way at implementing change of pace. Jamal Crawford is very good at doing this, or was when he played in the league. Essentially, it's a little hop that you perform in between your dribble moves that buys time for you to attack the defender depending on how they react. Out of a float, a player may decide to reset, explode to the rim, or change direction. And that brings us to the other many things that you can do to support your change of pace. So the first thing that you can do is pair your change of pace with a change of direction. Now, in my personal opinion, Derrick Rose is the best to have ever done it. And you gotta think, Derrick Rose is extremely fast. Obviously, his variation between slow and fast is extremely drastic. So if you want to compare him to someone like a Kyrie Irving, Derrick Rose, for example, it's a hypothetical. Derrick Rose can go from 0 to 100 miles per hour from his slow to his top end, while a guy like Kyrie Irving can go from 0 to 80. So that drastic difference makes all the world of an effect when it comes to changing pace. It's a lot harder to react and defend something so drastic like that. Now that speaks to his ability to accelerate, but what he was also really good at was deceleration. He could essentially stop on a dime whenever he wanted to. Now, if you take someone that can go from 100 miles per hour to 0, it's very difficult to guard. But also, you could honestly say this may be why he had so many injuries. His knees seem to have caved and not been able to maintain his explosive power that he was essentially driving into the ground when he would come to a complete stop. We'll never know if that was truly the case, but if you look at how he did hurt himself initially, I believe it was against the 76ers or something in the playoffs. Correct me if I'm wrong. But it was definitely a forced thing where his ACL just gave up on him. But with that being said, you take someone who has the ability to accelerate extremely well, decelerate and stop on a dime, and you pair that with an ability to change direction at will, you've got a lethal player. So essentially, pairing change of direction with change of pace is a great way to increase its effectiveness. Another way to do this is none other than elongated dribbles. And these are dribbles where they essentially stick to your hand a bit longer, take a bit longer to come off of your hand and hit the ground. And usually they're paired with floats. When someone's floating, the ball sticks to the hand a bit longer before it eventually hits the ground, but they don't need to be paired together. You can actually do an elongated dribble while you're just on the ground. Now, it is also seen in a hezi, when a player gives the appearance of picking up the ball, but they never actually do, put the ball back down on the ground and get to the rim or create some separation. That's another way or form of changing pace. Now, obviously, there are a number of players in the league who are great with the hezi. SGA is actually pretty good with the hezi. Obviously, Kyrie, obviously, James Harden. There are a ton that you can model your game after. But another thing that you can implement is visual deception, which essentially is a tool where you can walk up the court and pretend that you're waiting for something to happen. Maybe you're pretending you're looking for a cut and you explode to the rim. You could also maybe be jogging up the court, looking at the coach, pretending that, hey, we don't know what we're gonna run this play. When you get to a certain place on the court, maybe the 3-point line, explode, get to the rim, draw a foul, whatever the case is. Pretending as if you kind of don't know what's going on or you're waiting for something and being patient is a great way to implement change of pace. Now, one thing we know for sure, whether it's Luka, Kyrie, Harden, SGA, PG, Derrick Rose, These guys are all very, very creative and patient players when it comes to change of pace. So take those two things and implement it within your game, and you should be well on your way to developing your change of pace effectiveness. With that being said, change of pace can very much vary from player to player. It can be choppy and volatile like a Derrick Rose. It could be silky smooth like a PG, or very slow and patient like a Luka. It could also be just nasty like Kyrie. But at the end of the day, all these players are creative, patient, and most importantly, they're unpredictable. With that being said, thank you for watching. Hit the like, hit the sub. Jiggy memberships are out now. I'm Jiggy Hills, and I'm out, bro.